This is what these kind of myths do. They protect you from facing any reality. And if you don't face the reality, you don't do something about it, you don't move forward. And you go into a space of denial. You then blame others. And we see that very commonly. She made me do it. This is another myth. I talked with a woman who was 72 years old. Her husband had died, and this was just after the funeral. And I was expressing my sorrow about her loss. And her response was a really interesting one, which was, I'm glad he's gone. She talked about her husband's violence. She said he was only physically violent towards her once, and that was on their honeymoon, where he beat her up very badly. And then what he did was to remind her of that. On every occasion, he didn't like what she wanted to do, what she was doing, how she was doing it, etc. He just reminded her every time about that event. He would not have seen himself as a violent man, but amazingly violent, amazingly controlling, and ruining the lives of the people around them. It's really interesting. I was talking to a man only last week who explained to me that the reason that his partner ran naked into the street, banging on a neighbour's door, asking them to call the police, and that he was arrested and that he was charged, was all to do with stress. In talking to his partner, the reason she ran into the street and ran away from him was his attempt to anally penetrate her. Now, the relationship between stress, anal penetration seems a difficult one. That people are psychologically unwell, that's the reason they've engaged in violence. Some people are psychologically unwell. It's a very small percentage of violent men. The idea that I'm sick, that's why I did it, is really a way of bringing people to feel sorry for you as the individual. You are no longer the perpetrator of these actions, you're a victim of something. And everybody ought to rally around you in terms of dealing with this. If she hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have acted in that way. She didn't prepare the meal properly. She doesn't look after the house. She doesn't provide the right sort of sex for me. It's boring, it's whatever else. That's the only reason I did this. When we see famous footballers able to resurrect their careers by going onto television and saying, woe is me, I had a very tough childhood. And I'm not saying that that made me engage in any violent behaviour, because I'm actually not admitting to any violent behaviour. We know we've got things wrong, that this acceptance of certain people and certain groups, and you know, if you're famous you can get away with being violent. Alcohol is of course a major one. This is what I call the drunken bum theory of violence, in the idea that somebody drinks and naturally they're violent towards a partner. Of course, alcohol is a disinhibitor, but it doesn't make anybody be violent. One has to have the kind of drivers to engage in that, because many people drink, of course, and don't engage in violence. There is no additive within alcohol that I'm aware of that forces people into violence. And it's this targeted violence, of course. It's targeted at an individual, generally speaking, with a particular purpose behind it. It just happened. There was no plan, it just happened. It just suddenly occurred. If it just happened, there's no responsibility.